Hello my friends, welcome back to Garhdo Goes Geek. On today's episode we're going to be taking a look at the second horror film I originally planned to do a discussion for Halloween last year, but has now been pushed back as part of this bloody new year, as I've decided to call it, and that is John Carpenter's They Live. Stick around, I hope you have fun with this one, because I certainly had fun with the film. Right, They Live is a film from 1988, directed by John Carpenter and written by him as well, although I believe he used a pseudonym for that. Based on a short sci-fi story called 8 O'Clock in the Morning. Now, I can find no information about the original story. I've never read it. Doesn't even have a Wikipedia article, which is surprising considering the success of this movie. Now, the film itself is, like I said, written and directed by John Carpenter. It stars Roddy Piper and Keith David, as well as Meg Foster. Now, Roddy Piper is the wrestler Rowdy Roddy Piper. Now, it's kind of notable for that, if nothing else. But my exposure to this film before I'd actually seen it was the quite famous idea of the sunglasses that reveal the truth of the world. Because the plot of the movie, which was inspired by Carpenter's own dissatisfaction with the economic policies of Ronald Reagan, as well as like the commercialization of both popular culture and politics. Essentially, the plot is that homeless drifter John Nada, who's played by Roddy Piper, ends up getting a hold of a pair of sunglasses that, when he wears these sunglasses, reveal that all of the adverts, magazines, television shows, everything around him is all full of subliminal messaging saying obey or consume or stay asleep or marry and reproduce. It's one like honor apathy or something like that as well is on there. There's a lot of it's a great idea. It's a really, really clever idea. Just this idea that, there's every message that we consume is subliminal. And something that, as Reaganomics basically led into most of modern rampant late stage capitalism, most of which I find inherently distasteful. The mass commercialization of things that you got in the 80s didn't stop in the 80s. It's carried on. This film really struck a chord with me. And in the film, this subliminal messaging exists because there are aliens among us who are hiding as humans, and the glasses also reveal them as television personalities, police officers, political figures, basically in control of everything, either directly or through subordinate collaborators. It's a very, very, like, the movie itself is very fun. And obviously, it's the idea of these subliminal messages that with the monochrome black and white background, these big white signs with just the big black lettering saying obey or consume or, any of the other messages in the movie. Stay asleep is one that I thought was quite poignant. That's something that's in pop culture. Like, I've seen that before. And then I've also, another thing that I've consumed from pop culture, which is from this movie, and is probably the most famous thing from this movie, as far as I'm concerned, is the line that Roddy Piper has about halfway through, just before unleashing a string of gunfire in a bank, where he says, "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I am fresh out of bubblegum." And the reason that line, I'd argue, is one of the most famous things in the movie is because it became one of the signature lines for the character of Duke Nukem, a character whose whole personality basically consists of lines taken from 80s action and horror movies, specifically the dialogue of John Narder in this, and also Ash Williams from The Evil Dead. So, yeah, it's a very good film. It was a minor success when it came out in the 80s. It debuted at number one in the American box office. John Carpenter was already successful by this point. He, had a very successful career. But the movie had overwhelmingly negative reviews at the time. People were criticizing the social commentary, the writing, the acting. There was a lot of discussion about it being inconsistent, feeling like a B movie, feeling preposterous, the plot being full of holes, the acting being awful. But it's another one that seems to have had like a lot of critical reappraisal in recent years, to the point that it's now considered one of Carpenter's best movies. And considering the work that John Carpenter has, the man's catalog, the man's filmography just reads of a list of some of the best and most influential films ever made. Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. So to include They Live in that as well, and say that no, that's probably one of his most influential, that's high praise. And I think it is a really good, really really good film. Yeah, but yeah, so let's get a bit more into it. So like I said, the core concept is that Narda gets hold of these sunglasses and they reveal the truth of the world. There's a lot of build up to that, kind of mysterious things that Narda is kind of watching and not kind of being an active part of. Seeing a hacker hacking the television networks, saying that there's signals that are enslaving the populace, seeing a church full of, that's not actually a church and is more of a science lab, people complaining of headaches when they're watching the hackers broadcast and things like that. It's really quite interesting how it builds up. Like Roddy Piper does a lot while doing very little. For a large portion of this movie, a lot of it is just looks on his face or the way the character is carrying himself. The character doesn't have a lot of dialogue, which means that when he does have dialogue, it becomes much more notable. And it helps that some of his dialogue is very good, or at least very memorable. Not necessarily very good, but very memorable. He ends up in this shanty town, which the homeless population in LA is obviously a big and notable issue and has been for decades. And he ends up in one of these shanty towns, that's where he first experiences anything. He sees this underground movement, and then the shantytown gets raided by the police, gets destroyed. That the town is bulldozed. The church that the resistance is using as a front is cleaned out. But because he was there the day before, he managed to find a secret area, so he manages to open it and gets hold of the sunglasses. A whole box of sunglasses, in fact. And it's only when he puts them on and walks down the street that he sees the truth. And it very quickly, through a real quick chain of events, leads to him going on a spree that ends up with several people dead, because he kills the aliens. He ends up fighting two police officers, stealing their guns, then ends up in a bank where he ends up taking out, the tellers and some of the customers that are the creatures, the aliens, which is where you get the big iconic line. He then obviously ends up going on the run, kidnaps a character called Holly, tries to use her to keep him safe as a hostage. She manages to get him out of the town to her house in the hills, but then she turns on him, throws him through the window. He's trying to convince her to put on the sunglasses. He then ends up going back to a friend that he met on the construction site where he was working, the one who directed him to the shantytown, a character called Frank, who's played by Keith David. And it tries to convince him again to put the sunglasses on. Frank refuses, outright refuses to put the sunglasses on, which leads to this epic ongoing 6-minute fight scene between the two of them. The fight scene is really memorable because the whole reason they're fighting is because Nada is telling Frank to put the glasses on and Frank just refuses. So it's the effort that Nada has to put in to get the glasses on Frank himself. And it feels like a really important scene as kind of the crux of the whole movie, because it's so much of what the film is trying to say is wake up, the struggle to wake up and break through the subliminal messaging. And that's literally the whole fight scene is a microcosm of that, or at least that's what it feels like. It's yes, it's funny and it's a really interesting scene to watch, and became one of the most notable scenes in the movie, to the point that South Park parodied it shot for shot for one of their more famous episodes. But the actual scene itself, the reason why they're fighting is simply because Nada is trying to get Frank to put on the glasses so that he can wake up, so that he can realize the truth of the world. And same as what he was trying to do with Holly, which backfired on him. It's so impressive. And yes, the acting might not be fantastic, but the fight scene is really well choreographed. It feels real. It feels like an actual genuine fight. They don't just shrug off blows. They get hurt, but then they get up and they keep fighting, because the struggle is just ongoing between them. And it's only after Nada has been able to overcome Frank that he's able to put the glasses on him. And that's when Frank actually sees the truth. He sees, he sees the creatures, he sees the flying saucer, he sees the signs. And the two of them go into hiding and find the rest of the resistance, including Holly. And they learn the aliens are using global warming. They're trying to consume everything on the planet. They're promoting these humans that they've bribed into becoming collaborators by promoting them to positions of power, giving them more wealth. The a commentary on the whole 80s yuppie culture. And it's, then the meeting gets raided, the resistance gets wiped out, the aliens think they've won. And it's only through circumstances that Frank, Nada, and Holly all end up escaping, and then meet up together at the television station where Nada is determined to just end the signal and bring everything back to normal. which he does at the end. Like, the signal gets taken off and the humans wake up around the world, but it's a struggle, and there's consequences to that struggle. It does lead to one of the greatest endings I think I've ever seen. Like, I laughed out loud at the final scene, because the final scene really made me chuckle. I think it's one of the best final lines I think I've seen in anything ever. But yeah, there's consequences to this. This is the movie is a struggle to get everyone to wake up, and then they do. Oh, it was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a hell of a lot, and like I said, so much of it was just resonating with me, because I am very leftist. I'm very anti-capitalist. I'm much more socialist. So seeing the shanty town of homeless people that had been sort of like discarded by the rest of society, and how they're having to rely on each other, seeing the Reaganomic capitalism get commented on. Most of the times we see the television in this, it's an advert. It's not an actual program. And if it is, it's the news. But if it's not the news, it's a commercial. We don't see any television shows. We only ever see commercials. That's all that's in this on the television. Excuse me. Yeah, it's either the hackers broadcast, the news broadcast, or a commercial, and nothing else. And it's like, that is like, so much of the modern world can feel like that at times. Like, I had a rant the other day on Facebook. You can follow me on Facebook by, using the link tree. Pretty much all my posts are public. I've got my Facebook link in there, if you really want to extend those parasocial relationships with the creator. But yeah, I had a rant on there because I was watching videos on YouTube as part of research for an upcoming video that I'm doing. And I was getting so frustrated with just how many adverts there are on there at the minute. Like, I use an ad blocker when I'm on my PC, but I wasn't at the time. I was watching it on my phone because I was working. And while having YouTube on in the background while I was working, I think this half an hour video got interrupted 4 times with adverts. One time within the first minute of the video. Each time there was 2 adverts, and if they could be skipped, you didn't skip both adverts like you used to be able to. It literally just skipped to the second advert in the chain. And like, there was that. There was also one, I watched YouTube through my television because I've got a TV app for YouTube. Watched YouTube there, and it was while logged into my wife's account, and we ended up with 5 adverts in a row. Yeah, it was on Zulu's account. We ended up with five adverts in a row. They were all like 5 seconds long, but 5 adverts in a row on YouTube. It was ridiculous. I've never seen that before. Like, YouTube is just getting so much worse when it comes to adverts. It's awful. And it's like, everything's like that. Like, other streaming services are adding advertising into them. Like, Disney Plus are talking about it. Netflix, I think, already has. Hulu has in America. So, it's... commercialization is so bad. So bad. And, it's not to say that everything comes down to commercialization, but the whole idea of, like, anytime something, like, the world is a terrible place. Like, I'm going to get real for a minute, because I don't think I can talk about this movie and the effect it had on me without getting real. But it's like, the world at the minute is quite a terrible place for a lot of people. And like, I'm quite lucky. I'll freely admit I am fairly lucky. I've got a decent job, good family, a well-paying job. I'm not financially rich or anything by any means, but we're doing well. We own a house. Things are going pretty good. But I realize how fortunate I am for that. But things are hard for so many people, and it's like that's not even counting the the areas where there's wars and other violence going on, like the genocide that's happening in Palestine, or the war going on in the Ukraine. But it's like so much of the bad news people try and distract us from. They try and distract us from the bad news by giving us something light and fluffy. Like, for example, there's a lot of stuff going on in Britain at the minute with the royal family. Prince Andrew being on the Jeffrey Epstein flight list, and obviously the things he's been accused of there. So the royal family kind of distracts it with a puff piece about King Charles's new portrait and about where that's going to be shown. And then there's a news story that Catherine has ended up in hospital. And it's distraction, and then of course that's not even counting the pop culture, like the ongoing release and discussion and news cycle around things like Marvel and Star Wars and Star Trek, and even things more banal like Love Island or whatever the latest reality TV craze is, and it's all just banal mundanity. And I realize that this podcast probably contributes to that. But I'd like to think I'm not just telling you to just go and consume these things, try and come at them. I watch content, I consume content because the content's there, but it becomes my distraction from everything that's going on. And that's literally the point of the movie. The movie is literally saying that that's what it's for. That's the messaging in the film. So it's like, oh my God, I'm part of the problem. Oh God. Oh. Yeah, the whole thing is, it's all a distraction. It's all subliminal messaging so that we don't dwell on the bad things, so that we don't dwell on who really has the power and how unequal everything is, and how the wealth is all in the hands of an elite few who are, pillaging the planet for their own short-term gains, while the rest of us are just left to wallow in what's left, or worse, ground down by the systems. But don't worry about that. Worry about this. Worry about these new products that you need in your life. Worry about this new content that you need to watch. Worry about this. Worry about this puff piece story about something cute and sweet. Surely you want that to distract you, or this feel good news article. You don't want to focus on wars and other things like that. You want to focus on this happy thing. Oh, I realize I'm part of the problem, and I'm dissecting it, and it's, my whole this whole podcast is probably part of the problem. But yeah, this is why this film struck with me, because it's like so much of it is the fight to just wake up, to get the people to realize what's going on, and the everything that's going on around them. And that's why this film probably has this legacy that it does. Like, it's all about ideology. Trying to see the sunglasses in the film are like, they let you see the message beneath all of the propaganda, the glitz, the content, the advertising, the posters. You see what's really going on. you see the ruling class and how much control they have, and how the control they have over you and your freedoms. And yeah, that really, it's amazing seeing that. It really is. This film is so on the political left. Like really politically subversive with a message that still resonates like 35 years later. Like, yes, it's about particularly the Reaganomic capitalism, but like so many of Reagan's economic reforms led to, as much as I freely admit they led to things I love, cartoons and things I grew up with probably wouldn't exist in the way they do were it not for the changes implemented by Reagan. I did an episode before where I was talking about how things like G.I. Joe and Transformers and My Little Pony literally came out of changes made by Reagan. Same with the Star Wars toy franchise. It all literally came about because of things done by Reagan. But at the same time, it's like everything bad about that has led to everything that the world has going on right now. Every single negative of late stage capitalism. And it's all in this movie. Amazing. No notes. Oh. It's a good film. It's not necessarily a horror movie. It's far more of an action movie. But I think the idea itself is so horrifying. And like, to me, that's what makes good horror, is that the idea is horrifying. Like I've said, I'm a huge fan of zombie movies, right? I like zombie movies where the zombies walk slow, because while the fast running zombie movies, like, I can see why you'd want those for like an action standpoint, for things like the Dawn of the Dead remake or 28 Days Later, and I get it's trying to make them scarier because you have to outrun them. The point of zombies, like the traditional classic slow zombies, is they're inevitable. They're going to keep following you. They're going to keep hunting you down. And eventually they're just going to be in such large numbers that they will overwhelm you. They don't get tired. They don't slow down. It's that idea of the horror. The idea of the horror is horrific in itself. That's the dread. The dread comes from the fact that knowing that they're going to get you. Like was literally said in Night of the Living Dead, they're coming to get you. This works in a similar way. The idea of there's something out there controlling everything, but they don't want you to notice it, and they just want you to... Oh, God, I sound like a conspiracy theorist. I don't believe this, but it's like the idea that, or at least not that it's aliens or some secret cabal. It's literally just, this is how the systems are designed. The systems are designed that the rich people are on top, they're in control, and they want to distract the masses with bread and circuses. That's literally it. It's not, some neo-Nazis latched onto this movie and they were like, oh, it's all about the Jews and how they're controlling everything. No, that's anti-Semitic bollocks. It's like, no, it's literally, there are the people who are on top, who have all the money and have the control and influence they do to bribe and sway politicians, whether it's individual people or whether it's corporations. And then or the corporations that are producing the content, and they're able to produce the content that, and they'll just, if they get you excited about the next thing that they're selling you, you won't notice just how much your life sucks which means you won't blame them for the fact that your life sucks. Because if you just buy this thing that they're offering you, everything will be better. That dread, that horror is so real. And it's all in this movie. Fantastic. Like I said, no notes. Brilliant movie. And, you know, the fight scene is epic as well. And it's funny. What more do you want?
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
So, thank you for joining me in this episode. In case you were wondering, most of that is unscripted. I do tend to do some light scripting for my episodes, like I look at some notes I maybe want to discuss. But I tend, just because of how my mind works, I tend to only loosely script, if I script at all, because this is how my mind works. It's literally like I'll realize things as I'm talking through it. And it's while talking through and realizing just the critique of capitalism and consumerism that is at the heart of this film that obviously I realized, you know, I'm part of the problem. So thank you for joining me for that little revelation. That said, you know, please carry on consuming this podcast. I'm very grateful for it. You know, not that I'm not going to flash the obey at you or anything like that, but, you know, if you want to carry on listening, I'm very grateful for it. You know, listen to this and we'll stand against the horrors together. Oh, dear me. I think the thing is, you know, as much as I might like some sort of action be taken in a similar way to how Nada and Frank do in the movie, I don't think there's any sort of decisive victory like that can be done, and there's no real organized resistance in the same way that there is in the movie. So, you know, we can all kind of do our part, you know, to, you know, sign petitions and go on protests and, you know, share our opinions and critiques of things, but there's only so far we can go with any of that, unfortunately. So it is what it is, unfortunately. Still, though, so that we don't get too morose, let's wrap this up, shall we? I'm grateful to you all for listening. Thank you for joining me on the podcast again. Until next we meet, I hope you all take the very best care of yourselves that you can. Look after your physical and mental health, especially, is incredibly important with, like I said, just how dire some things are, you know, around the world. There's a lot of bad news constantly, and it's very easy to let it get on top of you. And, you know, yes, being able to turn that news off and not let yourself be affected by it is a privilege in and of itself. But if you are able to do that, if you are able to try and isolate yourself from those things, even for a bit, then, you know, consuming content, you know, if that's the only way that you have to do it to distract your mind, then by all means do it. You know, the part of the reason why I discuss the things I do is because they resonate with me, because they mean something to me. And, you know, sometimes the things that they mean is just that it's joyous and I like it, and it gives me a good feeling with everything horrible that's going on in the world, you know. And sometimes that's all you need. And yes, it is just consuming more content, but, sometimes consuming content is perfectly harmless. It's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. Despite how the movie kind of, how They Live kind of presents it. It's not in and of itself a bad thing to just enjoy something. I think the issue becomes when you keep consuming, where you don't let it sit with you. You don't let it make you feel any better. You're playing a game or watching a series, but you're too busy consumed by the thoughts of the next thing that you don't let the thing that you're enjoying already satisfy you. As long as you're still getting satisfaction from things, there's nothing wrong with it. So yeah, you've learned a bit about me politically. You've heard me rant. But yeah, long and short of it, go and watch this film. I think the film is a bloody good time. Roddy Piper and Keith David, I've liked Keith David for a long time. He's one of those, I'm more used to his voice than actually seeing him act, because of obviously some of the really impressive voice roles he's done. So seeing him in this was brilliant. Roddy Piper as well. I'm not really a wrestling fan. I'm kind of aware of who Roddy Piper is, but I've never seen him wrestle. Seeing the sequences in this, of the fight scene especially, I get the feeling he was a pretty good wrestler back in the day. John Carpenter said he actually cast Roddy Piper because they met at WrestleMania 3, in fact. That's how far back it was. And he said he liked Roddy Piper's look because he is a man who looks like he's lived life. And I think that's a perfect description for how Roddy Piper is in this movie. Nada looks, he already looks like a homeless drifter. He looks like the sort of person you would expect to be that character. He's not a standard Hollywood pretty boy. He's not a bad-looking man, but he's not a Hollywood pretty boy. He looks real. He looks like he's been through life. And that's, what you want for a character like this. So I think he does a perfectly serviceable job. But yeah, it's a fun little film with some great moments and some real comedy in it. Some bits some great action, some great comedy, some decent, thought-provoking stuff. What more do you want? And, it's John Carpenter, so it's going to be well done. John Carpenter makes good movies. So, yeah. Give it a try. They Live. Let me know what you think about it. Until next time, like I said, look after yourselves. Do the very best you can to enjoy life and take the best care of yourselves you possibly can. Until next time, my friends, take it easy.
Thank you, my friends, for once again joining me on Garhdo Goes Geek. Your continued support for this podcast means the absolute world to me, and I am grateful for every single one of you who stays and listens to one of my episodes. It means the absolute world. Now, if you would like to engage more with me or the podcast, we have a Discord community, small but growing, and we now have commissions open on Ko-Fi. So if there's a topic you would like to see me cover, you can pay me to cover it. All funds will be used for legal purchase of the relevant items where I do not have them. Have a look on the link tree for more information. Until next time, look after yourselves.